So, hello, Robters. Hello, everybody, for joining us once again. Today we have Jude Dike of GetEquity here with us, and okay, I'm not going to say anything about Jude so that he will introduce himself. But yeah, I'm sure it's going to be a very interesting conversation, and also because it's also an interesting opportunity for people looking to invest in different kind of things in Nigeria. So let's just begin. Jude, can you just explain first of all, like who you are, where you're from, and then the schools that you attended, home or abroad?
All right. So my name is Jude Dike. I am co-founder, CEO of GetEquity. GetEquity is a platform that provides an operating system around venture capital. So what that we tailor towards um, early stage investors, which is retail investors, early stage companies and stage companies, and also institutional investors. So we provide infrastructure that allows for you to, for example, invest in startups, either privately or publicly. And then for some of these startups, we also provide um, growth tools data, like a data room as a service, stock option infrastructure, and for institutional investors, fund management and syndicate management. So I've only ever schooled in Nigeria. I'm not sure I ever want to see the four walls of a school again. I went to
What school did you shake?
Unilag,
Oh,
University of
oh my
Lagos.
God. Okay.
I went to I went to primary, secondary, university in Lagos. Funny enough, all in Yaba.
Okay.
Um, my university, which, like you said, did me shaggy, is the University of Lagos. Um, yeah, but so far I would say it's been interesting.
Even Unilag is Yaba-ish now, so
Unilag is Yaba, all of them, all my schools. It's not my fault. Blame my parents.
Nice. So, first of all, do you speak Yoruba?
Uh, Maybe when I'm pissed off or
Ah.
when I'm happy. I think when my mood is heightened, either in happiness or when I'm pissed off, I speak Yoruba. But on the average, just normally, I don't know how to speak Yoruba. But I think I might be able to hear a few things.
Wait, the extreme Jude is a Yoruba Jude. That's why
Yes, the extreme
it doesn't
is
speak.
a Yoruba truth.
All right. Okay, interesting. So I just want to ask first of all about Unilag, right? What made you choose Unilag, right? Is it because they had the degree you wanted? What did you study in Unilag, right? And basically, how was the transition like? Because a lot of students, I mean, I don't know, Sha, if anybody from outside Nigeria has listened to this, but like the structure of Nigerian universities, right? SS1, you have to choose basically the path you want to take. If you follow the path that you chose from SS1 into university as well.
So for me, yes. Um, I think I've had that path since I was maybe five.
Fine.
So I studied computer science in Unilag in the University of Lagos. So from the age of five, because of Dexter's Lab and Zeta project, I'd always want to be a scientist. That's
Or
all I knew I wanted to do. I didn't know what type of science it was. I didn't know what scientists did. I just knew that I wanted to build like Dexter's Lab and Zeta project. So I think also in that year, my mother first got a computer for the house. So I had a computer from when I was five, and then just played around with it and all of that. So by the time I was getting into uni, to be very honest, I think I got this bias from my parents. My parents always had this bias with federal schools being the schools where the actual discipline and proper education is had. I don't know why. Thankfully, after I went through secondary school, they kind of gave up all hope on that.
mm,
But they used to have this thing with, I mean, because back in the day with, federal schools, you'd have people who are coming from different parts of the country to your school. So
Yeah.
it usually used to be like a survival of the fittest in terms of brains. I don't think it was like that when I was in school, but it was one of those things.
I think there are dollars in Unilag, Jude.
I mean, to be honest, all I'll just say is Unilag was a mixture. That was what I liked about it. But in the instance of where everybody is all brilliant, I don't think so. But anyways, so I had that bias too, as with I think one of the major things that I had a problem with, because I never had the intention of of schooling outside the country for postgrad.
Okay.
I always just had it in my head that I was going to go outside the country I never had it for undergrad. I always had the idea that I was going to go outside of the country for postgrad.
Okay.
And I still do. I still have a big issue with private universities in the sense that they're quite constrained, or as a student, I'll be quite constrained because I'd always had a problem with authority, with rules that in my head don't make sense or can't be explained to me. So if someone tells me you shouldn't do this, you should be able to tell me the reason why I shouldn't do this and what the possible consequences are before I listen.
So sorry, did you go to a boarding school for secondary school or a day school?
Both. So in my JS1, I was a day student. Then JS2 and JS3, I was in a boarding school. And my mother pulled me out because, I was wrecked. I got all my shit stolen. Everything was horrible.
Is it a federal boarding school or private?
Yeah, it was a federal boarding school. So, getting into Unilag, it was literally it. I didn't have any other option. It was you are going to Unilag. There was I didn't have any other school that I was thinking, down to the fact that when I had to fill, the JAM forms and everything.
Yeah.
I know my father had this thing of, I think you should go to University of Ibadan. So I just put that as a second choice as per, okay, fine. Because this man is asking me questions. And then every other school, I just randomly picked. For the other options that you have to pick, I just randomly picked. It was literally, I was only going to go to Unilag. There wasn't any other thing.
But it's not that easy. The way you talk about Unilag, it's not as easy entering to Unilag. I know people that wanted to go to Unilag, but they didn't get space at the end of the day.
Yeah, so I've heard of that. I remember going to write JAM, and then people saying, oh, this was their third time. Someone said that was their fifth time. There's someone who was like, yeah, I've been trying to get into Unilag. That's why I'm still writing JAM again. And I was just there like, oh, wow. Interesting. Well, God help all of us. But then Unilag had they had this thing called a diploma program. It was a foundation program. They had a diploma program that's for your first year, and then if you pass your grades, you get into your second year. Okay. So I'd done 2 exams into Unilag. The first was a diploma exam, and then the second was JAM. Thankfully, I got in on both. So obviously, I picked the one that favored me more, which was direct JAM. Because getting into diploma, there's still you are one leg in.
Yeah,
you have to still pass. You have to still pass the main internal Unilag exams before you can actually be confirmed as a Unilag student into your second year.
Okay.
It was all good at the end of the day. Computer science, yada yada yada. Sometimes I like to think that I'm a brilliant student. Unfortunately, Unilag lets me know that was probably not going to be the case in this instance, because not gonna lie, it was horrible. It was
horrible. What? Like lecturers, school system, students.
Yeah, it was everything. So I used to be. Remember, I said in my head I planned that I was going to go outside of the country for postgrad. But then I didn't just want to go outside of the country. I wanted to go to an Ivy school. So I'd always done this thing where I would take like classes from Berkeley because I mean it was computer science, right? A
Yeah.
lot of their classes were online. You could find
Mhm.
them on YouTube. So I would find my regular classes in school boring and go hang out with my friends in engineering. But then take classes in like Berkeley or Harvard or um, I know I was always and this is literally it. So I had every year I was always targeting, okay, this is what their school fees is, this is that, this is the entry requirements, all of that. So
Mhm.
I think the schools I had shortlisted to was and Stanford, Caltech, and Berkeley.
Okay.
Um,
Wait, let me guess. A Unilag professor brought you to say this is not Berkeley. Is that the experience?
oh my God. I've literally had a lecturer tell me, you didn't give me what I gave you. And I'm like, but sir, this is like global standard, whatever. I mean, it's like, how does that concern me? And I was defeated.
Oh my God. You even had the mind to confront a lecturer at
Yeah,
university.
because I'd never done that before. But so two things. I mean, because we're in computer science, we had the theoretical and the practical.
Mhm.
Now, I was really good in practical because I mean it's code, right? There's no two ways to write code. You just write code, right? There's no, oh, this is the lecturer's way of writing code. You just know how to write code or you don't. So in those parts, I excel. Plus,
Mm.
I was also a lazy student in the sense that I hate assignments.
Okay.
So only the assignments that I was able to easily submit or whatever. Like, let me just say, the Nigerian schooling system didn't work for me.
I mean, you're
Which,
prepared for Berkeley in the first place. Like your mind was fixated on something entirely different.
yes. So I mean, it was tough. I finally gave up I think in my 400 level because Unilag is 5 years, and
Mhm.
decided, you know what? Let me just graduate. Let me just give these guys what they're expecting me to give them. Let me just cram and pour.
Mm.
And there was a completely drastic change. I mean, I saw the change. My results started. I never went below a 4.0.
Like
But before
throughout.
I'd been struggling on like a 2 point something. I think my highest prior to then was a 3.1
Okay.
on a 5 point scale. Until I decided, you know what, I'm done. I'm done trying to learn. Let me just give these people what they want and get out.
Yeah.
That's why I said I'll probably never, because the moment I gave up, I didn't just give up with uni, like I gave up in general. I gave up with school in general. That's why I said I don't think I'm ever going to see the four walls of a classroom again.
But I mean, if you're going to, you say you want to go outside for postgrad still.
Oh, I gave up that postgrad dream. That's what I'm saying. It
Oh,
died
you gave
there
it
and
up.
then.
Oh, wow, wow,
The
wow.
day I made that decision that I was going to just cram and pour, postgrad dream died. Plus, I mean, I finished with a 3 points, I think a 3.2. That's not Ivy League. That's not Ivy results,
Okay.
right? But even though, I mean, I know that I could still do like a PGD and all, but school wasn't my thing anymore. I'd literally just given up.
Mm. This is like it sounds so subtle, but it's so deep at the end of the day because literally the Nigerian system beats you down and
Yeah,
say like
the Nigerian school system defeated me, literally. And the moment I gave up in general. But the one thing that I picked out of the whole thing was that I loved to write code. I mean,
mm.
from the moment I wrote my first piece of code, it gave this godlike feeling, right? You're
What was your
creating.
first piece of code? What was that? What did you build?
So it was a contrary to what many people build where they do Hello World and all of that. Our first introductory to programming class, they wanted us to build out I think it was no, it wasn't a, it was a type of calculator, a quadratic equation calculator in Visual Basic.
Okay.
So build that up, design it, all of that. The moment I built that, and I took it a little bit further into like complex calculations, etc. But the
Yeah.
moment I built that, and I could see like people could use my shit, It was a whole new world. It was a very different kind of feeling. And since then, I don't think I've ever stopped writing code. Since then, I just, throughout my time in uni from then, I used to just think of random shit and build them.
That's interesting. I mean, I used to hear stories that, like from friends and stuff, how a lot of computer science, right? I mean, depending on universities, of course, I think private do better in this sense, but like a lot of computer courses, there's not really the practicality of it's not really there. Right? So you do a lot of cramming of lines or just knowing systems and whatever, right? But the actual building and the actual coding, right, is left to the later years of
For
this.
you to figure it out on your own. I
Exactly.
think that's the one thing I would say, okay, Unilag was really good in, right? Of which I never mentioned that the major reason why I wanted to study computer science later on was because I wanted to hack. I wanted to be a hacker, right? Which is like half my class when we first entered. What do you want to do? I want to be a hacker. What do you want to do? I want to be a hacker. And we saw other shit. We saw maths. We saw physics that hit us basbos. And everybody's thing changed. From there, everybody started picking out new things that they wanted to do.
So the Dexter, everybody saw that it's not about
It's not working.
there's more beyond cartoon.
Oh
Um,
my god, it was a lot. But yeah, it was the good thing about Unilag. If I'm actually going to give them props for that, is they probably have the best or one of the best, if not the best, computer science program in the country. Right. So from like our very first year, we had been knee deep in theoretical and practical. And the way things were structured out, I mean, in our final year, we were doing big data and machine learning. In some instances where some friends that I knew of were just doing Java, like literally it was just Java, Fortran, and COBOL. And I'm like, who in this world does Fortran and COBOL?
yeah.
But yeah, it was fun. I mean, I'd have to give them that because they also mentioned that. I mean, the lecturers themselves also mentioned that what they call it, the NUC in itself has a certain level of say in the kind of syllabus that they can teach.
Okay. But like, isn't that centralized in the sense that the whole country must use a particular syllabus, or did Lagos go beyond? Or is it that like
So it was actually Unilag that went beyond and almost got punished for it. I remember at a time when the NUC, and literally you have the NUC, which is a bunch of, in my own opinion, 70-plus-year-old men who are trying to create curriculum for 16-year-olds in the 20th century. And then many of them are talking about how, they learned abacus and they learned Fortran and COBOL. And that's literally what they put to you in a developing world. But many of our lecturers were people who, would go to, like, let's say, for example, these were people who had graduated from, I think a couple of them actually did graduate from Ivy, because I remember there's one of them that went to MIT. There's another one that was a graduate from Imperial College London. There were some of them who would go to like schools in maybe South Africa and everything and end up teaching. So you'd know that many of these people were actually good at their shit. And they also, so Unilag as a school in itself kind of like has a bragging right? Everybody's proud by default. So in their own way, they also felt that
Lagos.
yeah, probably. I think it's a Lagos thing, and then the Unilag thing now makes it worse, etc. Right? So many of them had this thing of, as big as I am, I can't come and say that I'm teaching this. My colleagues around the world will laugh at me. So they came up with their own curriculum, which in some ways almost got them into trouble with the NUC, etc. Right? There was and I remember the NUC had already put out at, computer science degrees will be 4 years. Unilag was like, nope, we're doing ours at 5 years. That
Wow.
one to cost a problem. Yeah. So,
Wow.
I mean, but at the end of the day, that's a combination of all of those kind of made our computer science curriculum really good. Because I remember back at that time, this was give or take maybe 2012, 2013, 2014. Lecturers from Unilag used to be like the feeder lecturers into, I think the second best curriculum that I've seen was Covenant. And at that time, the feeder lecturers made a Covenant, for example, made their curriculum quite good, was the lecturers from Unilag.
So they put them basically.
Yeah, I mean, they would coach them. Those ones would obviously never work full time because there's this thing with federal lecturers and the ease they get from. So it's not even just students, right? Even lecturers feel like the schools in themselves are too stringent for them. Because I know every lecturer I know pretty much had a company a company. Basically, they had another job. Let me put it like that.
So lecturing was their side hustle.
Lecturing was pretty much their side hustle. Wow. So in the grand scheme of things, actually, lecturing didn't pay as much as their side hustles. But the reason why they did it was that it enabled them have two things. One, the prestige, and then second, the time.
Okay.
So it particularly worked out for them. And well, the good thing for us is that it also worked out for us in the sense that we had a really good curriculum. But I mean, the Nigerian factor still plays in the sense that it was just horrible. Many people, we still had the A's for God, B's for me kind of situations that you'd hear of in many federal schools. We still had those. You would still have to deal with lecturers' egos, all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Jude, before we go ahead, like I have Toby Oraka here with me. He's also an eruption, and yeah, just so he can like introduce himself to you as well before we go ahead.
Oh, no problem. Hi, Toby.
Oh, hi, Jude. How's it going? I've been hearing your comments on the entire educational system and the flaws. I'm actually a law student at the University of Lagos as we speak. But you know, ASU and how they've kept us at home for too long. So everybody's finding their way, you know?
Yes. And then if you're lost in Unilag, then you can definitely tailor into what I'm talking about with how the curriculum is probably the best, but it's still shit.
My mic was muted when I was laughing so hard.
It's also crazy.
Yeah, I was also intrigued by the part that you were like, you give the lecturers the global standard, and they're like, no, I'm not into the global standard. Give me exactly what I gave you. Finish. Just do that and you pass. I mean, it's a crazy circle because it keeps on going on and you keep on going till only God knows how long. So I can attest to that. Well, thank you for being on the show. I'm happy to, like co-anchor in quotes, just to be here, just listening. But I'll partake as much as I can. But I appreciate you for, honoring the request. It means a lot to us and our options, Jude. Thank you for that.
Thank you for having me.
Okay.
So do you guys have what you call yourselves like in Unilag? Like, I don't know. I think Eagles or something Eagle or something. What do you guys call yourself?
Unilag. I mean, they say apocalypse.
What was that?
But it has a certain taste in my mouth that I've never. I think I would say I've probably mentioned that only twice or three times. That's counting right now.
Wow, it sounds like a very rotten ginger tonic.
It's just not giving what it's supposed to give.
Yeah, at all. After all this suffering, you don't come and use that name. It's such a pity.
It's why I'm like,
And
I'm a good luck to people who, are proud of their. I don't even know if Unilag has a school anthem, and if I do know, I promise to not learn it.
Jude, yeah, discredit for somebody listening that's like, Unilag is my dream. The way you're bashing this school, oh, yeah, literally killing hopes of some children.
I mean, see, Musa, to be
I'll still
honest,
tell
it
people
goes
that
like that everywhere.
it's probably the best school that you would have in Nigeria, but you should also keep in mind that it's quite shit. The experience is horrible, but it's still probably one of the best experience if you're comparing with Nigerian education in general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree with you, but just as you can lambash like people also kind of lambash other universities, like one way or the other. I've had this guy, I don't know, he just finished from CU, I don't know when, but he wrote something about CU that people were like, "What? Are you serious? Did this thing happen? Did it not happen?" I don't know the facts because I've personally not read it, but I've met him in person. So he was just telling me about it. So, schools are generally like that. But to be honest, the more we keep saying these things, what is then the way forward? Or should we go in your Mock's way? What then should we now do now?
Which way, Toby? Which one is a level school?
To be homeschool or great school for the children?
Oh, okay.
So I was saying personally, right? I what I advise people and what I advise people that I know is you still have to go to the university, but know that you're going just to get the certificate. You're going to end up schooling yourself, which is fine. Because if we're being honest, and I tell this to devs, to engineers and myself, because engineers typically would say, yeah, I'm not necessarily going to. Engineers will say, yeah, I don't need school for anything. I can just be a dev and be making money. But I'm like, yeah, it'll come a time when you probably want to move to the US to work at Microsoft now or something, right? And the US embassy will tell you that. So if you're trying to move to like the US, for example, you need to show that you have a BSc or 12 years development experience as opposed to that BSc. So in those kinds of instances, it's not just better to just have the BSc.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I was just thinking, Seth, like my opinion of uni is like these days is just first of all, I believe you like your way and Jude was literally my thought pattern in the sense that a lot of the syllables in universities around the world are very public. Like they don't even hide it. It's like this is what we do. This is year one. This is year two. Like they give you the topic, right? They don't give you the materials, obviously. But they're like I don't know, maybe physics, introduction to physics, right? I don't know. Like this law or whatever. They will like give you the scheme that they will do throughout the year. I'm like, bro, so you're giving me all this information. If not that your certificate has something, right? I will just sit there at home and like go through it myself. And the truth is that if we actually individually, all things being equal, right, we treat like going to university in the same sense that okay, if I did not actually go to the physical university, but I universitied myself, right? We can do a 4-year course in 2 years in practical terms. You're just staying in your mother's house, not doing anything, and like you're just reading the course content that is there. Like you can literally do it in 2 years and get it out of your way.
You can go to university via YouTube. You don't even have to be reading
Exactly.
it yourself. Just attend digital classes. That's the crazy thing.
But as you said, like the world is so functioning in a way that you need those certificates. That's to satisfy other people's uncertainties about so many things.
That's just it, to be honest. That's literally it. That's the only reason why I finished school. Because I'm like, yeah. I think I had a talk with my parents. And my mother was like, yo, what are the advantages of not finishing? What are the disadvantages of not finishing school? There are plenty. What are the advantages? So it was a pros versus cons thing. And I was like, yeah, I kind of agree. Even though right now I don't see the need. But the certificate in itself, there's a certain need for it. Let me even bust your head, right? I've graduated from Unilag since 2016. My certificate is still with them. I'm just there, like, let them just have it for safekeeping.
Toby,
Because I never needed it. So I'm like, okay, fine.
I'm
I did
actually
it
shocked.
because so that whenever I need it, I can go get it. But yeah, let them just have it for safekeeping.
So that is to say, you have never actually used your degree per se to get any. It has not
No,
been
I've never used my degree in my life.
Jesus Christ.
I hear you are with GetEquity. Interesting, but I mean, I think this is something. I think it's not for everybody. In the sense that not all, like a law student, you need your law degree, for example. Like you can't win, you can't. There's nothing
No,
to
you
do.
need it.
Exactly.
Okay. So before we get on to like GetEquity, your products and what you guys do there, right? I just wanted to ask you, like, what do you think about being Nigerian and feeling Nigerian in the 21st century? So Soke generation, like what has been happening recently? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Especially because you're a Nigerian.
Yeah, to be honest, I think it's a good and a bad thing. So there's pros and cons. Obviously, one of the biggest cons is my passport, right? But there's pros in the way the world works, in the way you view the world. Now, as someone from a third world country like this in Nigeria, with the whole what we call Nigerian sense, be street smarts or whatever, there's the way we look at the world, especially if you're someone from this part of the world in terms of Nigeria, and you still have like Western, you still have that Western exposure. So you're able to see both sides of the coin.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that most people who, let's say, grew up in a third world country, in a first world country like the US, that's a factor that they don't really get. They don't really see, but you can see. Then that's I think is probably one of the biggest is one of the biggest advantages, and it's something that we've seen with Nigerians who have maybe schooled in Nigeria and then went to the US or the UK for their master's degree or something like that. You kind of see the way they excel giving those situations, because when you've learned to make do with very little, by the time you see excess, you just thrive, basically. It's like Kenyan athletes that come and dominate what's the word called? They always dominate marathon races. And I mean the reason is because typically Kenya is on a high elevation. So they have quite limited air, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to Kenya and Rwanda. They have limited air as opposed to those of us who are closer to sea level. So they have quite limited oxygen. So now many of these people have trained in places where they have had to conserve their oxygen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And conserve their oxygen and maintain more energy from that. So now when they get into a place like ours where you now have more than enough oxygen, they are able to smoke the rest of us, because even with the tiny maintenance of how they like maintain their lungs and everything, it allows for them to run much longer, much faster. And that's just how it is for like the African context in with regards to having to make a lot out of very little. So an example is even in the venture capital ecosystem right now, there's little cash. As a startup, you're having to do a lot. You're having to, as a if you're an engineer right now in, let's say, Nigeria, for example, you don't have the luxury of specializing. So that's why you tend to see that on a junior landscape. So the early engineers in the country here are usually better than early engineers in like the US, etc. But where they now, what they call it, where they now smoke us is in their ability to scale, because we don't have that capacity yet in this part of the world. So that's one disadvantage. We as Africans, it's very hard, or it's harder for us to imagine things at a larger level of scale, or in larger levels of proportion, because you can't know more than you know.
Yeah.
So an example is someone who is building, like, let's say, a bank app. When you ask that person what your vision is, or if you ask someone what their vision of a savings app right now that they're trying to build, what they would compare it to would be a piggy vest, right? As opposed to maybe things that exist in the broader sense of the entire world. So that's typically how it is. And then again, I'm going to reiterate this one, the passport.
Yeah.
That passport thing is a huge hindrance.
I mean, I can't obviously blame you for saying the passport is a huge hindrance, because looking at the passport-free zone in quotes, where your passport can take you to, it's quite a handful of countries, and majority of that country, they're all in Africa. So what's now the point? If you look at the Singaporean passport, if you look at the US passport, look at Finland's passports, those passports give you access to enter countries for, let's say, 90 days. And with perhaps 100 plus countries across the globe. But here we are with Nigerian passport, stuck with it forever, except you choose to denounce your citizenship. What can we do? Only hope for the best.
Exactly. I mean, and that 100 days, that 90 days could literally be the difference in a lot of things. An example is in venture capital. You see startups who are raising. Many VCs want to be able to talk to you face to face. You want to be able to go to conferences where you can meet and network. But then, because of the fact that you're having to spend an extra month thinking about visa and your visa processing, and maybe you need to do X, you need to do Y. If someone with a US passport will just book a plane ticket, that's the only thing they need to think of. Okay, what are the flights going into? Let's say there's a fintech conference happening in San Jose, or there's a fintech happening in maybe Portugal. All someone from the US or the UK needs to think of is, is there a flight from my airport to that place? But in Nigeria here, you now have to think, oh, who knows somebody in the embassy that can speed up my visa?
who is the connect?
And that connect is based on probability.
That connect. You get into situations where you hear, the embassy is already maxed out. Oh, sorry, you can't get a date until maybe December, and the conference you're going to is in a month. In fact, if as a Nigerian, if you see a conference that is happening in a month, you don't even bother to apply, because you know that the visa processing period is going to take anything from 2 weeks to 1 month.
So will you? I mean, from what I hear you say, right? Then basically, if I'm somebody with a startup in Nigeria, right? I'll come on to something else I want to refer to, but I'll continue with this thought. So from what I hear you say, if I have a startup in Nigeria, I think that there's potential. I think that a lot of investors will invest. I mean, basically, the strategy is to get right. We look at where does finance actually come from, right? I mean, the world. So like a lot of from Y Combinator, a lot of like the big ones, right, come from the US. And then I see smaller ones, right, in different areas in the world, in Europe, in Asia. Basically, the strategy should now be, okay, in Europe, probably get a Schengen, right? Like, have it ready. Go and have it. Anyhow you want to get the visa, just have it ready for at least a year or two, right? And then like for the US, do the same thing. Will you advise that? Just like visa that is ready for you to use at any time, then you can start applying.
Yeah, let me tell you something even crazy. Every founder, and this is something that the older founders will tell you, get the visa inside your passport. 2 years, Schengen visa, 2 years. There's some things with, and this is one of the reasons why many founders register their company in the US as well, is the fact that you can actually apply for, whether it's an extended visa license, an extended long-term visa for like 5 years. They will tell you, do a PR in Dubai. This is literally people with experience telling you that, look, as a founder, you're going to spend many times 6 months out of the year touring in different countries, trying to network, meet other founders and raise money. So you want to be in that position where someone tells you, hey, are you able to be in XYZ country within this month or within the next month? Your answer should be yes, let's meet up. Because that is usually the main decider for many founders that have told me that just that one conversation has helped them secure or close their rounds.
Wow. Wow. Hey, see, like these are just nuggets, very deep nuggets.
I mean, Jude, it's been a nice intro with you, but just diving straight into Get Equity. So what's Get Equity all about, from at least I'm sure our listeners will have like a snippet of what you do per se. So what's Get Equity all about, and what are the services you offer per se?
Okay, so one thing, one major thing, a Robin Hood, but for startup investing. So if you want to, as opposed to you buying shares in like Facebook, Google, etc., Apple, all of that. In this instance, you're buying shares in startups, right? So think of it like the Paystacks in the early stages, the Flutter Wave in like maybe the year 2016, all of that. We allow for you to be early investors in those companies because typically, I mean, historically, venture capital, which is basically the field of investing in startups, has typically existed majorly for, in fact, only for a certain class of investors called accredited investors. And for you to be an accredited investor, you need to have like $200,000 in yearly income, etc. But since I think 2018, especially in the US with like the jobs, it's called the Jobs Act, JOBS. But it's what allows for people to invest up to a certain amount inside startups. So anyone can invest from at least $100 into different startups. Now, GetEquity started following with that module. And what we do is to allow for investors or to allow for anybody. In fact, I would say as far as you're over 18 and you earn, you're able to invest at least $10 in a startup that you think would do well.
I mean, small B investing $10 in the startup would be so proud of myself when I become maybe 5 year older. I mean, like looking back and seeing what you invested when you were younger. So, I mean, the opportunity is mind blowing. Having to invest in small startups, perhaps not all of them are small, but for the fact that they are a startup company and you're able to invest so small amounts, it gives there's this feeling it gives of
It's giving
I'm doing
investors
something positive. Yeah, it's giving a positive.
Warren Buffett vibes.
Yeah, it's giving Warren Buffett vibe. Like you're sitting down crossing your leg and you're telling your mates, "Do you know I just invested in 2 companies now?" But they don't know the amount. Though they're just telling them we just invested in
I
two
mean, in
companies.
many instances, the amount doesn't even matter. It's the prestige of, yes, I'm an investor now.
Exactly, the Buffett vibe. Ah, that's so mind blowing. But speaking of the venture, the venture capital you spoke about a while ago. How did you gain interest in the world of venture capitals? Did anything spook you or triggered your interest? How did it come about?
I mean, the one thing that has happened throughout my entire life, throughout my entire working career, is that I've mostly worked with startups. I've almost always worked with startups. So early stage startups. In many instances, I've been a very early employee. So I've seen some of all these startups locally and internationally grow from maybe being a team of 5 now into $100 million company, etc. Right? So, and the one instance that a it has always been a big deal is the aspect of fundraising. Um, so that's kind of caught my attention. And then in the fact that right out of university, I think in my first year, there were these guys who were, they were an incubator per se. And then they were, for people who had ideas, you didn't even have to have your idea you didn't have to have a fully fleshed MVP, but just from your idea, they would invest and all of that. I mean, they picked interest in the project myself and my friend did, down to the point where we're talking about investment amounts. And I think until one day they just randomly ghosted. But that's just one of those things.
Wow.
Yeah, they randomly just ghosted us.
Wow.
But it was fun. It was fun. I think that was my first opening into the fact that I didn't know anything in running a startup. So I went to learn. And I went to learn from going to work with startups. And I think that's the major thing that brought me into the world of venture capital.
Amazing. So now we can refer you as the Jagaban of startup companies.
Bro, this is literally his Emiloka moment. Literally.
I'm happy about that. So how did you think about GetEquity? How did the idea of the company come about? Was it from the Unilag experience, or from what you love doing, or from the situation of the world or the country? What was the idea behind the company?
Okay, so GetEquity's own also came about from my work as an early employee in the blockchain ecosystem. So
Okay.
I'm also a blockchain engineer. I don't know if I mentioned that, but like in one major thing that we had seen with the blockchain ecosystem was the fact that a lot of crypto companies at that time weren't companies that VCs, that people in venture capital were investing in, because many of them didn't understand it. So they would go, yeah, I don't really understand this thing. I think it's a nice idea, but I don't see how this would work. So I'm not putting my money in. So many times, crypto industry had always funded itself. And the way it had funded itself was through micro investments. It's saying, oh, let's put it this way. Let's say we are like forward thinkers, right? So here's this new forward thinking idea everybody's excited about. And then it's like, okay, guys, I'm going to sell ownership of this idea that I am implementing right now. And it was through something called ICOs, initial coin offerings. So that's where you started out with the Bitcoins, with the Ethereums and everything. Ethereum, all these other new coins, they had ICOs where it's saying, oh, this is the idea for a project, a blockchain that is called Ethereum. This blockchain is going to allow people to build and write code on top of it. And because we want to fund this blockchain, we're creating these things called tokens. And these tokens now, you can fund this blockchain by buying these tokens. And these tokens have a value to USD, right? That you can always sell back for that particular value. And this value is always going to keep increasing and decreasing. Or this value can always increase, this value can always decrease. And this is how, the Ethereum ecosystem came about, or the blockchain ecosystem came about. So it has always funded itself mostly without the input of VCs until the year 2017, when the first crypto boom happened. And people started seeing that, oh my God, there's a lot of people inside of this crypto shit. Let me put my money inside too. And that was when VCs also started grasping the idea that, okay, maybe this is something worth putting money that we can afford to lose inside. And between 2017 and 2021 and 2020, when the crypto boom happened, after 2017, crypto went down for a bit. And many VCs were like, yeah, this is why I don't invest. But by 2021, when, many people saw their money go from maybe $1,000 to like $20,000 or to like $40,000. That was when a lot more of VC money came into crypto, and it's still there till now. So like seeing all of that, and then me being, an engineer who's going, yeah, how do I create a system where Africans can basically, or African startups can basically get funded without having to go through all this VC ecosystem. Because, yeah, VCs are starting to look at Africa, but it's still not as, or it still wasn't as fast as we needed it to be. And also is the fact that, yeah, we say VCs are looking at the African ecosystem and VCs are looking at investing in African companies. But it's usually the later stage African companies. It's the Flutter Waves and the Paystacks and the Series A's and Series B's. But for the early stage companies, for those of us who are just starting out or we have maybe an MVP, they don't look at this part of, they don't look at us when they count, when they count this part of the world. So it was a thing of how can we get these companies funded? And what I basically did was to take the concept of fundraising that has happened over time in the blockchain ecosystem and has proven to work and brought that into what I'll call the Web2 ecosystem, which is the underserved markets.
So what you just did was to solve a problem. You agree with me?
Yes.
Fantastic.
Sorry, I tend to ramble a lot.
Yes. Like from what you've said, from all what you said, it's clear to me that you are out to solve problems, not just in your field, but also in the digital space, especially with this crypto of a scene. And wow, you actually solve a lot of problems. I mean, you agree with me because people are daily looking for where to safely invest their money, not just in stocks and bonds, but also keenly in startup companies. Where do I invest good money in startup companies? And that's the gap you've just breached. Wonderful.
Basically,
But
yes.
moving on, we still have some, apologies if we bug you with a lot of questions, but the more the merrier. You can agree with me. But how did you choose your team? Because it's an important thing. Working with human beings can be a little bit challenging. So how did you get to choose your team? Who remains on the team? Who leaves? Have you had any fires? Have you had any hires lately? What does your team look like?
Honestly, I'm still confused as to how, let me put it this way, how I've managed to scam these people into coming to work on this thing. Maybe they think that this, I kind of feel like, yeah, I'm not the only person that believes in the idea of what we're doing, but I would say 90% of the people that I've hired, I met them off Twitter. And this includes my co-founders as well. So I have this habit of randomly DMing people that I find interesting, or if I want to hire them, I'm just going, hi. Like my shooting my shots game for people that I want to hire is top notch. Like that one. I mean, I don't think I've ever even gotten a no. And I'm like, I don't know how I managed to scam these people.
If they listen to the podcast now.
No. They won't feel scammed. They won't feel scammed, to be honest, because looking at where the company is now and where it's likely to get to in the future, people will even want to bring more clients on board because it's a wonderful and brilliant idea. So if I was part of the team per se, I wouldn't feel scammed, to be honest, because it's a brilliant, it's a fourth industrial generation idea, if you will let me use that. So, but I'm sure. Do you have? You said you've just spoken about how you met your team, but how do you keep the communication? Do you people have like physical meetings, or how do you manage the communication with your team?
So my team is 100% remote and distributed.
Wow, and you managed to build this big already.
So thank God for Slack, I guess. We use Slack mostly. So everything we do is on Slack and through Slack. And I think it's also one early thing that, thank God, I did was to find people smarter than me, in terms of building a structure, etc. So the person that currently runs like our operations now, I just DM'd her and I was like, hey, how far? Look, I want to TV from your company, but I can't afford you right now. So how about you come work? How about you come join me on this thing part time, and I can pay for what I can afford, which is a percentage of your time.
Wow.
It's a brilliant one.
Toby,
I mean,
no,
Musa, to be fair, this is the craziest idea I've had today.
Also, I do that.
Literally with my pen and my jotter. I'm taking down serious notes. I'm learning
I've
a
done
lot.
that a lot of times. That's how I had more than half the people I had.
Sorry, Jude, what did she respond? Like, what was her response? Like her literal response when you sent her that message?
I mean, after laughing, I was like, okay. After laughing, she was like, okay.
But is she like a full-time staff now, or she's still part-time? Or she has not?
Right now, she currently heads operations in GetEquity.
Wow.
Completely full-time.
Wow. Because I know I went through the website and I saw her image. Wow. So she's the one we are talking about. That's amazing.
Yes, she's the one we're talking about.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Just one final question before Musa just takes some investing in Nigeria questions. But I mean, just for now, before I ask any other question, but what is the significance of you helping other businesses? Like, do you gain satisfaction, or what significance does it pose to you?
So personally, right, and let me say this is like my own personal gain, is the fact that I enjoy having a network effect. Like, and this is personal. I mean, it could be selfishness or whatever. I enjoy being the fact that I'm a plug. I just like it.
So you enjoy being the middleman.
Yeah, just be extension wire, Toby. That's it too.
So I mean, before I became a founder, one thing I used to do even as an engineer from my startup friends that time was to help them find engineering talent, right? Help them find and vet engineering talent. So if someone will come to me like, yo, I'm looking for a senior engineer, I can't find any, how far? And even some engineers will be like, yeah, guys, we need something. Or they'll come to me and be like, yeah, maybe they need a new gig or something like that. And I'll just be that plug that plugs people to each other. And I'm like, yeah.
Wow. I mean, you'll agree with me, you've taken what we call entrepreneurial risk. I mean, this is what we call risk. And the risk is actually paying as it's actually paying not just now, but we believe that it's going to pay even more subsequently, because it's one of the foundation that we are on now, even as we've also gone to know about GetEquity. It's an interesting foundation because it won't just be for us, but for the generations coming after us, and it's going to be here for a long period of time. I mean, the risk is worth the while, I believe. But I'm happy about this conversation we're having. So you enlighten more people about GetEquity. Thank you, Jude, for now. And I mean, let me just give Musa some time to speak. I mean, I've spoken quite a lot. Musa, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, Jude, just for somebody right that wants to, so just the step-by-step process. I actually registered to GetEquity myself, but like I just want you to explain the step-by-step to the investor's perspective, right? So I don't know, a Bisola that wants to invest through GetEquity into our company, and then like the other angle, right? The business coming to you. So just the B2C and the B2B angles, right? Yeah.
Okay, so let me start with the business because that's a bit more straightforward. So as a business, you want to list on GetEquity. We have certain criteria. One of them is that you're already live. You're already a live business generating revenue. So we have basically have an application link or an application process. It starts with an application form where we get a couple of details, your current traction, revenue, things about your business, incorporation details, all of that. Then internally, we have a venture team that reviews each of these, should I say, applications. And based off that, they provide a recommendation to our IC. Our IC means an investment committee, which basically is made up of a couple of venture analysts. And what we pretty much do is, based off the recommendation from the venture team, decide if a company is good to list or maybe not right now for whatever reason. And given that feedback, I mean, feedback is given to the companies in themselves. But if a company is good to list, then this is where legal and business development takes over. So we send them our legal documentation for listing, which typically comprises of a safe. We have a prepared safe agreement that we use. And then yeah. And then they get, once the documents are signed, we set them up on the platform and they're pretty much live. And people can start investing in them from that moment. Now, from an investor's point of view, it's basically saying what we do in this instance is you sign up to register, you feel we have KYC AML. So KYC is know your customer. So we take details about you and where you are. Our anti-money laundering, we have AML partners. One of them is called Ukudo. So the moment you sign in, one of the things that we do is we scan your passport, like an identification document. So either your passport, driver's license, all of that. And the thing Ukudo does is Ukudo has access to a global database of anti-money laundering database and things like anti-money laundering, terrorist database, all of that. So they basically just scan you against those databases to make sure that you are not blacklisted on any of those. And the moment that is done, all of this typically happens in a less than 5 minutes process. So from you signing up to your email, to verifying your email, to us doing KYC ML process. And then with those, we have also part of our process is also like your address details, banking details for if you want to do like direct pull from your bank account or direct withdrawal. And once that is done, it's saying we use a wallet-based system, so you can always fund your wallet and use that to invest in any startup.
Okay, like I've gone through your system, right? Because as I said, I signed up, and what I particularly like from an investor's perspective is just the fact that there are reports, right? I mean, the same way that in NGX, for example. So in Eruption, coincidentally, right? Toby every week gives reports on the Nigerian exchange group, which is just they are the ones in charge of the Nigerian stocks, right? So he reports that
Nice.
on Eruption. So I mean, there's just financial services are unfairly always better, like 70 all of that. Anyways, like I just like the fact that you guys are professional in processes, in the sense that I saw that each company, right, has a monthly review. Like you must give a report on how your company is doing, irrespective of the funds that you receive at the end of the day. So I think, like, for me, right, yeah.
Oh, I said yes.
Yeah, I mean, from an investor's perspective, because I'm also like very interested in due diligence, right? Just DD processes for where I put my money. I think
exactly.
And I love the fact that you also like put their pitches, right? So like their pitch decks, the company ideas and all of that, so that you don't just pour your money into something you don't know, right? And that you can just see who it is that is managing this company, where they are. And like even you go to the point of even saying that they should state how much they have left in their accounts. I think that's amazing. But I want to ask, so within Get Equity, right? There's for companies that have already been they've already like raised up, I think, the money they needed, the capital they needed, right? They are put into another category. And in that category, right, you can still so it becomes like a trading forum, right? From what I understand, whereby people can just so if I have a token, I can exchange it or list it up and somebody can buy it, right? So can you just explain
Yes.
like the important because it sounds a lot like the token you spoke of at the beginning, right? With the blockchain.
Yes.
Sounds a lot like that. So can you just explain like how tokens work for companies that are not raising for necessarily but are still on your platform?
So basically, what we are building is pretty much a stock exchange. So kind of like NGX, right? And what we're building is a stock exchange for startups. So it's saying that I do not necessarily have to list on, let's say, the Nigerian Stock Exchange, etc. So it's in two ways. I want to be able to raise money, and what what we've seen is that typically in venture capital, right? It's saying that you invest in a company, you have to wait like 10 years for that company to exit. So for that company to either be acquired or to list on a public stock exchange before you can cash out. But now what we're trying to do with Get Equity is because the typical investment appetite of many Africans, and that's why many Africans don't fund startups, is that it's like maybe 2 years max or 3 years, even with the HNIs that we have. It's usually 2 years. In fact, some people will say it's usually every election cycle, but you didn't hear that from me.
So I expecting exits next year.
Maybe. So basically in that instance, what we now decided to do was to build, if you had a stock exchange whereby you want to sell your own equity, maybe somebody had wanted, like for example, till today now, if there are people with access to Flutterwave shares, there are people who would want to buy Flutterwave shares.
Yeah.
You get. So it's saying we want to get to that point where when you as an investor wants to sell your shares in a startup that you invested in early on, because there are people who are willing to buy in those shares, we can facilitate that for you easily. That way, everybody's happy. And obviously, we take a transaction fee, so we're happy too.
I just want to ask, like, on the regulation of that, right? Because the buy orders versus so like when you see right the buy and the sell orders, right? Obviously, it makes sense that it's much more expensive on one side, right? But how do you guys regulate that? Is there like a cap that you put for the amount somebody can put? Like, so do you guys connect it to? I don't know if you guys value companies that come in order in your platforms, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we have valuation partners for that.
Okay, so do you guys like cap sell orders and like sell amounts that from people, right? Or do you just let people just like put any amount they want to sell their own tokens to others?
Because we want to make it a free market, it's like you can put any amount that you want. But then there's gamification involved in this, game theory involved in this, right? Mm-hmm. So where you have a free market, you also want to have market makers and market takers. Yeah. And what that helps for is gamification of that exchange. It's saying, even though it's a free market, yes, but if let's say a company now is worth $2 million, right? Mm-hmm. And you bought tokens in that company, now you want to sell your own for $10 million.
Yeah.
If unless there's somebody willing to buy for that $10 million, the tokens that you want to sell is going to remain pending till that kingdom come. Mm-hmm. Maybe until that company gets to a point where someone sees a $10 million valuation as good enough. Mm-hmm. And in that instance, that's where you now have market makers who are people who would, let's say the company is worth $2 million. Market makers would be buying the company at maybe a maximum of 10 or 20% increase in value, because I mean, just the mere fact that the company listed on GetEquity, right?
Yeah.
Or they've closed their round on GetEquity, in
Mm-hmm.
many instances is an improvement in their valuation,
Mm.
even if it's as little as 20% improvement in their valuation, but it's still an improvement. So sometimes the market makers would do at maybe 10% or 20%. In that way, because they are flooding the market with liquidity from both sides, so from buying side and selling side,
Mm-hmm.
you find that you kind of see that in a free market, the price still remains between a certain level. And this is what typically happens in the much larger exchanges like the NASDAQs and the NASDAQs, the New York Stock Exchange, etc. They
Yeah.
make use of market makers and market takers.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
All
All
right.
what you said have sounded so serious that it makes me think whether or not one requires a license for all these
Yes,
stunts.
one definitely requires a license for all these stocks, because you can't just do these kind of things out of vibes. So recently, I don't know if you've seen this, but the Nigerian Stock Exchange came up with something called the Digital Asset Exchange License. I think it was released in May. So they have like rules and regulations on how you, as someone who wants to create this kind of exchange, should behave.
Okay.
And for
And then the kind of registration that you need to do, the amount you need to have in the bank, all things like that.
Hmm. So we're saying GetEquity have about $2 million or more.
I didn't say that.
okay.
You're not disclosing the company's secrets or policy. No, it's actually fair. It's actually fair, but I get the regulations and the licensing. Okay, so one requires the licensing to pull these stunts. Okay.
I just wanted to state some stats first, right, around investing in Nigeria. And then I'll like, based on what you guys are doing, right, with the festival, so far, I will pose a question. So I mean, in Nigeria, right, SMEs, they basically contribute about like 48%, I think, of national GDP and accounted for like 96% of business and 4% of employment, right? And I see that, especially like in Get Equity, because I recently spoke to Rukayat, I'm sure you know her, Rukayat Bello of Register, right? And, some of
Yes.
them are very micro, right? They are not SMEs per se by categorization. Some of them are micro SMEs, right? But I mean, this is just for SMEs, right? 84% employment they provided, and like that they were about 39 million MSMEs, right? So like the micro, small, and medium together they consist of about 39 businesses, right, in Nigeria. But then, I mean, by 2021, by I think it was the capital importation, right? Basically FDI, if you like, was 6.1 billion in 2021, but it declined year on year, 31% by like the end of the year last year, right? So I mean, I just want to ask first of all is what do you think about like Nigerian people just in having faith I think is the word, right, having faith in Nigerian businesses, right? Because even Nigeria tends to even focus a lot on outsiders, so like not even diaspora per se, but like people abroad to just invest in them, which is obviously necessary, right? But what would you say about like Nigerians having faith in Nigerian owned enterprises?
Yeah, I think actually we do. So there's different settings. I think in the tech ecosystem, in the digital age now, the way or the scale or the speed or the scale at which Nigerian businesses can grow is completely different from how it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It's now the fact that because you are Nigerian based or you started out in Nigeria doesn't mean you're limited to Nigeria. As opposed to, when it was 20 years ago that you have no offense, but an Emeka and Sons type of business. Now you can literally start a business in a year plus. You're moving into Ghana, you're moving into Kenya. Like, globalization has helped a lot, right? So it's no longer looking at Nigerian-owned businesses and looking at them as, oh, because they're tied to the naira, with naira devaluation is going to affect them a whole lot. For many businesses, their earnings is no longer in just naira. It's now across board and across the world. So you have Nigerian businesses that are in Nigeria, but also earning forex because people outside of Nigeria, you make use of them.
Okay. Yeah, I think like globalization has really influenced just not just the business ecosystem, but also like the financial markets, as you stated, right? And just FX in general, and what kind of money itself gains appreciation over time, based on business transactions. And I mean, in Africa, right, I think it's fair to say, apart from Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa, right, probably like Senegal, up there, and you tend to see Nigerian businesses going there. It's like Kenya and Nigeria are like twins somehow. We have to forget Ghana and start talking about
I actually think so.
yeah, like they like coming here. I think CC Hub. I mean, you say you stayed in Yaba, so I'm sure you know CC Hub, right? CC Hub is like their twin brother iHub in Kenya, right? It's like we have replicas of each thing in Pensa, probably like with Flutterwave. We just have like our mirrors. We need to have Kenyans to have that conversation one day. But yeah, I want to.
I mean,
Yeah.
even the last time I was in Kenya, I had a conversation with a couple of Kenyans as well. It's like, look, I tell people that I know how we as Nigerians tend to, I think maybe like the early 2015s ish, Nigerian tech companies would want to move into Ghana. I'm like, me, from my own personal experience, if once I launch in Nigeria, the next place I'm moving to is Kenya, because it's quite, even though yes, it's the culture is a bit different, but it's in terms of the speed, the market is simpler, or it's much more similar to Nigeria than Ghana.
Yeah, it's more amiable.
And one would even argue that it's even better structured than Nigeria. So as a Nigerian business, I think it pays me better to just move to Kenya directly, or to expand into Kenya, as opposed to trying to do Ghana.
I read that you guys GetEquity expanded into Kenya as well, right? Recently. How has that been for you guys?
Yeah, we expanded into East Africa, started with Kenya.
Okay. How are the business like there? Like the equivalents of you guys also have
Like I said, it's less stressful.
But wait, so let me ask you a question here. Maybe it's because I'm a Nigerian that I can even ask this question, but do you think it's because sometimes a Nigerian talking to a Nigerian, right? It just has the nuances that sometimes is not as that's just annoying, right? As opposed to a foreigner, because I mean in Kenya you're a foreigner, right? So the way they look at you, right, as compared to imagine you're a Kenyan, in Kenya we GetEquity, right? Do you think the relationship will have been different? Do you think there's you is meritocratic in this sense to be a foreigner and negotiating business in another person's place?
I mean, the first thing I did was to find a growth person in Kenya that does the local negotiations in Kenya.
Okay.
And it has worked 100%. See, the scale at which we've grown in East Africa alone has been tremendous.
Nice.
So one thing I advise founders with is to get a growth person in each of the ecosystems that you're trying to move into. It saves you a lot of time, saves you a lot of cultural context, all of that.
So have you grown more in Kenya compared to Nigeria?
I know Nigerian market is still our nawiwi. Like in terms of if I'm say product market fit, we've gotten that in Nigeria. Kenya is second paced. There's also Rwanda, there's Tanzania. We're starting out in Uganda, and I think that's going to be very interesting to see. In In fact, it's much. So here's the thing, right? It's actually even faster for you to scale in East Africa than for you to scale in West Africa, because the difference with West Africa is that a lot of West African countries are very fragmented, more fragmented than any other country, than any other
Region.
region in Africa.
Mhm.
So you can go to North Africa and you see Egypt, Tunisia, um, Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia. There's a certain level
Yeah.
of similar language, right? You come to East Africa, the M-Pesa has worked so well that if you're trying to do any financial transaction in East Africa, as far as you're riding on M-Pesa, you're good.
Mm.
Come to South Africa, everybody just automatically die. Is it no? There's an osmosis that happens with every South African country, with every country in South Africa, into the South Africa as a country itself. So whether you're in Zambia or Zimbabwe, once you're in South Africa, they already trickle into. So most people in Zimbabwe or in Zambia will plot in South Africa. But now when you now come to West Africa, Nigeria and Ghana are completely different. In fact, Nigeria and Ghana is more similar to Nigeria and its actual bordering countries, which is Togo and Benin Republic.
Mm.
Do you see how crazy that is?
Mm-hmm.
What the fuck?
Like the way we talk about Ghana and our similarities with Ghana, one would expect that Ghana is right beside us. But there's actually Togo, which is right beside us. There's Benin
Actually.
Republic, which is right beside us.
Actually,
The markets are completely different. The language is different, so they don't even speak your language in the first place. I think the Togolese speak Portuguese. I think Benin Republic speaks French. So you see how it's like so crazy. If you want to get into the market, if you want to conquer the markets in West Africa, you have to plan, and it takes a shit more time.
But
as opposed to like East Africa.
Jude, don't you like, for me, all I hear actually at the end of the day, right, is, I mean, obviously, this is like deep work and just frustrations, years of frustrations, right? But once you get it, like once you're able to put your foot in Togo, in Chad, in Benin, right, they have to pass through you before a lot of things happen. So I'm just imagining, like from your business as well, like once you guys can plant your, I mean, it's difficult, but once you can plant your legs in these countries, right, a lot of countries would look for, okay, who is in Nigeria that's already there, right? And you become the reference point for businesses.
Yes.
Okay,
But here's the thing. It is still that time, that once you're already there, that's the thing. How long will it take you to be like Flutterwave is trying to get across how many African countries? Flutterwave is in 26 African countries. We have 54. Flutterwave is 6 years old and is probably one of the largest. I think they're the largest African company right now, like African startup, right? In terms of fintech. And even them in 6 years have only been able to get to 26 countries.
Yeah. I get your points. So let me just talk about your festival, right? Maybe you want to talk about the startup. First of all, like there are just some innovations and ideas that I see people doing, right? That like it makes me happy. I'm like, like this is something I would like to do myself, but like if I see another person doing it, I'm excited. Because you see, it means that. So I don't know if you know Lex Friedman. Have you heard of him? He's an MIT professor, podcast.
Yeah, I think Nats Friedman, right?
Lex, LEX, yeah, Friedman. He invites like so many people, startup founders, AI, a lot of things from different fields. Anyways, he was having a conversation with Joe Rogan once, right? And he just gave this analogy of ideas that, ideas are like this, will I say insects or like this aliens that hover around the world, right? But they're trying to find a place to settle. So your frequency of thoughts is what allowed the ideas to rest on you somehow, right? So at the end of the day, if maybe they come to you, you started the thinking about an idea, right? And it's like wanted to harvest you, like take over you. But then you're like, I beg, it's too hard. Or one of these excuses that you give, right? Then it leaves you, now looks for the next person, right? And now stops there. Yeah. So I see like a lot of I'm sure that's happened to you. You see you had an idea one time and you see somebody doing it, right? I always remember this moment. And like when I saw the startup festival, it was like that for me. I was like, this is so cool. I just want to ask you, like, what is the startup festival, right? What are you planning to do? What is it all about, right? And what is the competition? Because I saw there's a pitch competition all about. So.
Mhm. So basically, one thing that we wanted to do was, like, we are, at the end of the day, one thing we're trying to do is to grow the narrative of the startup ecosystem in Africa, in developing ecosystems, or starting with Africa. And it's like, it almost feels like tech or tech companies or startups in themselves are separated from the general community. You'd hear of, like, I can mention quite a bit of startups, even quite listing on GetEquity right now, that a lot of people don't know. Even GetEquity, yes, many people might know GetEquity via social media, but on mainstream, or in the mainstream, you walk on the road, people don't know. Very few companies have achieved that. Maybe Piggyvest, and a handful of others. So
Try.
one thing we want to be able to do, this is probably going to be a yearly thing, is get to that point where the mainstream community gets to meet with startups. And that's why we're doing an exhibition. It's come one, come all, come and meet people that are building interesting shit. You might see some people that are solving a problem that you've always wanted to, that you can partner with, that you can even fund. Some of them that you can even decide to work with or decide to work in.
It's
So
like,
that's basically the core concept behind that.
and it sounds like, the thing I remember that connects me to like gamers, like when there's like gamers, not Nigerian, of course, when international gaming competitions happen, right? Where you just see all these people coming with their companies trying to win a grand prize. Can you just talk about the pitching competition? Like, what are the benefits for somebody who wins the pitching competition? What is it all about, right? And how is it structured as well?
Yeah, so we have two pitching competitions. One is the early, and the second is the maybe seed or growth stage. So for early stage, these are people who, yes, you have an MVP, you have, you're just starting out. So maybe you have a little bit of traction. Now, this event is packed filled with investors across board, venture capital, VC firms, etc. So it's saying come pitch to like to the public, right? Come pitch in general. We have access to a couple of VCs who are actively looking for early stage startups to invest in. There's the pitch competition is going to be sponsored by a couple of institutions. So there's typically uh, I think there's typically the cash benefits of that, but then there's also, even we ourselves, the network effect of GetEquity, being able to help these startups who will come to pitch on that day grow.
Nice.
Fantastic. It's been quite a conversation so far, and I'm happy about the public enlightenment. And to be honest, I'm sure our listeners will also register for GetEquity via your platform. But just so we don't take much of your time again, some few questions before we end. So some questions before we end. What's your dream for the company? What does the future look like for GetEquity?
So my future is for us to be the stock exchange for startups across developing ecosystems.
And I want that for you people too, and not just for you to be startup, but to be legally a startup, like publicly recognized, and having that big place in the big world. I agree with that.
Exactly.
But do you have a Nigerian dream for GetEquity? Any particular Nigerian dream?
I mean, majorly, right? I know we get told to dream big and all of that, but even for the Nigerian dream, is the sense that uh, I want to create an ecosystem where the middle class is once again a middle class.
Hmm.
Generation of wealth is something that we need to do as a people, right? And generation of wealth typically has been proven not through saving, through investing.
I can agree with that. I mean, look at the Buffets, them, look at the Dangotes and the Dantatas, those that have taken their time to invest. It speaks on from generation to generation, so I can attest to that. It's quite a lovely. It's been quite a lovely time with you, Jude. But we want to appreciate you for the time and the energy you've spent on this conversation. Do you have any final words for the listeners? Any final random words? Could be a quote, could be an advice, just any final random words for the listeners.
It would be come to the startup festival. I'd love to see quite a lot of people.
Fantastic. So, for you listeners, you've heard our founder, GetEquity, the Dike Jude. So, come to the Startup Festival. I'm sure the information will be out there in the public. So, get yourself acquitted and get whichever notice you want to get based on this festival, and be sure you be there. And I'm sure Jude himself will be present at the festival. So brace up. You also be connecting, I suppose. Of course, you have to connect. So, DK, Jude, we want to thank you so much and immensely thank you again, over and over again, for honoring this invitation and for being on this podcast series. It's been a wonderful time with you, and we hope to engage you in more conversations as we progress. Not just as we progress, but as the company itself progress. So it will also be on record that we had an eruption. We are at the startup phase of GetEquity. I know you've been in the game for some time now, but we want boldly say that we get equity from the beginning. No, please, we're not just we didn't just come newly. So thank you a lot, Jude. We hope to have you back on our podcast series. Thank you so much for being part of this program, Jude. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. So, well, for you listeners, you've heard it from the horse's mouth, the founder of GetEquity. If you want to know more about GetEquity, you will have the link just down below. Ensure you subscribe for GetEquity. If you have any questions, of course, they have a mailing list, so you can email them anytime. And they also have a live chat. Yes, because I was on the GetEquity website. They also have a live chat, so you can, whatever thing you want to do based on information or as regards knowing more about GetEquity, you just get in touch with them, reach them on the platforms or media handles, and I'm sure you have a lovely time investing in startup companies. Thank you, listeners. Thank you, world, for having us, and we do hope you have a lovely day. Bye, guys.
Thank you very much, guys. Bye.